All right. So yes. So today I said I was going to talk about stillness, and develop that idea. So let's start here, just sort of reviewing where we are at this stage. Right, we're in the thick of the COVID-19 epidemic. Looking at the projections, it looks like the peak in Louisiana is going to come somewhere around April 9th. So later this week, that's going to be the highest number of cases of people who are going to have it. For the United States, it's probably about April 15th is the peak, with some states being later than others. So we're in the thick of it. I read somewhere, I don't know if this is true, but it seems possible that at least the majority of the human population around the entire planet are under some kind of isolation order, where they're supposed to be staying at home and limiting their contact, right, and breaking away from people. Um, so we have been on some kind of isolation now for 3 weeks. It's becoming a sort of normal for us. For Jennifer and I, what that has meant is that we have been walking the exact same path every day. We've got a path that we have walked the dogs down to Betty Virginia Park, around and back from our house. When we go jogging, it's the same path. It's really it's the most viable path for us to do, but it means every single day, once in a while, twice a day, we're taking exactly the same path. Um, and there's no end in sight of this kind of isolation. It's not obvious, to me at least, when this is going to end up. So some of us I know are very busy, right? That we've got, our jobs are demanding a lot of us, our time is demanding a lot of us, that it's harder for us right now because of these isolation orders. Others of us feel stifled, like we've got time and no outlet for it because we can't go anywhere. But in both cases, I think we're starting to feel agitated. At least I am. Starting to feel agitated, kind of having a hard time focusing, getting easily distracted by little things, easily distracted in my time, nothing structuring what I'm doing. Starting to feel a little bit of what we call stir crazy, right? It's like I've been inside too long. I need to get out. And I think this is something that is normal. Something that happens when I get socially isolated. It comes as a sort of tension underneath there. For those that have had time, we've been talking about and thinking about the things that we can do, right? And we talked about that some last week, right? Starting a garden, right? A bunch of people are starting a garden. The seed stores have been reporting a demand that you've never seen before. I saw a thing recently about eggs, where people are getting chicks, and the people that provide those chicks are getting more orders than they've ever had before. So people are getting their own chickens to try and get their own eggs. We've been talking about washing hands and exactly how to do it and exactly how long to do it, right? And becoming sort of meticulous and detailed about how to do this. There have been debates about, social distancing have been going on and on. All of these giving us something to do, right? Should we wear masks or should we not wear masks? Do they actually help or do they hurt? What kind of masks? How to do it? All of these things are feeding us, right, with something to do, right? We can do this thing. We can take this action, and we can get there. We can prepare for this storm that we know is coming. The shape of it is still a little unclear, whether it's going to be months or a year or more, what kind of numbers we're actually looking at. We talked a little bit about the racism before that we have seen and we might see more of, the anti-Asian racism, calling this, the Chinese virus, blaming Chinese people for it, or anyone who, Asian Americans of any kind, they start to look at and think might look like it. As in some of our immigrants and things like that, I can see a lot of racism coming out towards immigrants of many kinds, right? Saying they're bringing us here and they're contaminating us. And so we talked about how to deal with that. What can we do in response to that? So far, we have avoided too much in terms of people close to us getting sick. At least I haven't heard much about it. But I do worry about it. I don't know about where you are in different relationships. I know my parents have not been behaving the way I would have them behave. They still go out shopping regularly. They promise that it's okay, that it's no big deal. But I'm like, they don't need to. They have what they need, but they they keep wanting to. They're talking about taking a trip, moving between their houses that they've got in Arizona and Colorado. I'm like, you're supposed to stay put. But they're not listening right now, right? They're not listening. So here I am trying to think of, and talking with my siblings about what we can do to get my parents to be a little better. But none of this is helping me anymore. I mean, I'm still feeling stuck. I'm feeling agitated. I'm feeling like I'm bumping against all of these restrictions. In my spare time, I've been reading Julian Baggini's How the World Thinks. This is a great little philosophy book. It's meant to cover metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, like all of this stuff from all around the world. So looking at traditions that Western philosophy typically ignores. Things coming out of Hinduism and Buddhism and China and Islam and all of this, and talking about what's going on in there. And this week I just happened to be on a chapter about emptiness, focusing on a Japanese concept. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. You probably have seen an enso around somewhere. Here's what it looks like. Pretty straightforward, right? Let me see. Oh no, well, let me look at my notes and the enso. Pretty straightforward in terms of what you see, right? You see something that is a circle that is there, simple, clean, not a lot of lines. Now, the claim Baggini makes is that for Westerners, right, we see the circle front and center. The point of the enso for the Japanese and the way that they deal with it is that the background is as important to them as the circle. That is, the combination of those two things are what makes it what it is. It's not simply a circle. All right. If you're anything like me, that seems pretty vague. That was hard for me to get my head around, to be thinking about. The claim is that we as Westerners live in a world of things, right? Where those things are solid and they have an essence that makes them what they are. In particular, I think we tend to live in a world of practical things. Like what makes something what it is what it's good for, what it's useful for. And its uses are what orient us in the world. So if you think about things like stoplights, the red and the green and the yellow, like all of those orient us. They tell us what we're supposed to be doing. When we see streets with lines on them, like we know how to stand and where to go and how to relate to those things. And all around my house, I see all kinds of things that are for doing something, right? They're tools in one way that I would grab with my hands and I use for this purpose or that purpose. And that's how I orient myself in the world, is around these things that are useful for something. And it's often how we orient ourselves around our own ideas of who we are. That is, if we don't tend to just have a job or things we have to do, we often think of ourselves in terms of careers, right? A career. This is building, this is going somewhere. Every activity that I'm engaged in, every project that I finish has to be building and combining in one way or another. Even within families, people are often thinking about success, right? How do we make a successful family? How is this going somewhere? How can this build? This is a practical, useful thing, right? For teaching or for helping kids grow up or something along those lines. If you've been in the business world at all, or academia like myself, you've surely had conversations about your vision, your mission, your goal, your outcomes, your deliverables, like all of this kind of thing is a world of practical, useful things. And so this is how we have lived. This is how I am certainly used to. This is a common, so I think, Western way to engage. So whether we're rushed right now with too much to do, or whether we're stuck where we can't, a hard time being in the moment. We have a hard time. We never build, right? If we are, we feel vulnerable or left behind or something like that. So if we look at the enso again, let's think about what this claim means, right? To say, okay, you've got a circle, but it's not defined in this way by being a circle. It's a relationship between the background, right, and the foreground. That is, it's the relationship between the black there and the white that you see that make it into a circle. Changing the black, that line would change the circle, it would change the shape, it would modify it. But changing the white would do the same as well. If we brought the white up to all be black, it would disappear, it wouldn't exist anymore. It's not that it's hidden, it's gone. The background, right, and the foreground come together to make it that way. It's the relationship that we're supposed to be focusing on. The way this gets expressed in the Japanese thought that Begini was talking about is that everything is empty, right? That nothing is permanent. So the circle is empty in the sense that there's nothing inside of it that makes it what it is. It's those relations, right? It's the edges between the circle and the background that make it what it is. Begini offered a haiku, one from the 16th century Dogen, that's supposed to highlight this relationship. And it sounds like a lot of these sort of Zen haikus that you might hear. It takes a little bit to figure out what on earth is going on. So here's how it goes. Lonely silence, a single cicada's cry, sinking into stone. All right. What we're supposed to notice here are the edges. So there's an edge, right, between the silence and the noise of the single cicada's cry, right? And you don't have the silence or the noise, right, without that edge between them. A single cicada is something you should be thinking about. Like, you never hear that, right? When there's cicadas, there are bunches of them, and it's so hard to pick out any individual one of them. So getting a single cicada is to have an edge, right, between the cicadas and, well, what you'd expect there to be with the other ones. The silence is what it is, and the cry is what it is, both in virtue of its impermanence, right? You need the silence moving into the cry. That, right, back and forth, lands into sinking into stone, right? The last call there. That is into something repeatable, solid, right? Sinking into it. There's a contrast between the loneliness of the silence and the presence of the single cicada, right? We've got edges on each one of those that we're supposed to notice. You don't have just a thing existing on its own. It's the relationships that Enso is supposed to bring out here, that his emptiness is supposed to bring out. When Begini's talking about the edges, that really did get me thinking about what's been going on with us. Because it's those edges that are being highlighted. It is the relationships that are being highlighted. Why do I feel agitated and uncertain and difficult for me to move in different directions? Because the edges between our lives have changed. The relationships between our lives have changed. As we're thinking carefully about social distancing, we are marking, right, the edges of our houses, the edges of the paths that we take. We're confronting up to all of those. And that is being highlighted right now, I think, by the way that we're trying to live. One of the features that Begini brings out in this culture and in many other cultures is an idea of nonlinear time, that time is a cycle, right? That everything returns over and over again. The way that we think about seasons is usually the way I think about it, right? Summer comes over and over again. Fall comes over and over again. What's important about that way of thinking about time is that there is no progress or decline, right? If we think of spring as things getting better, well, fall is going to come. It's going to change, right, in that way. So we can't think of it as this line of constant improvement, constant getting better, constantly using things to build, I don't know, my career, my life, the direction that I'm going. Instead, if you think of a world with nonlinear time like that, if that's how you approach it, the metaphysics you use, then the challenge is to not go against the grain, right? Don't try to be planting fall. Don't be planning to harvest all kinds of things in spring. You've got to go with the grain. What are we doing now? How do we work with reality as it is, rather than thinking about how can I overcome this, transform it, make it into something that it's not. So those different concepts came together and really helped me think about why I'm being so agitated by being quarantined. And I'm agitated because I'm having a hard time being still. I can feel a lot better if I can watch the emptiness unfold with no agenda. That sounds very Zen, right? To put it that way. But what does it mean? It means to watch these relationships, these edges between one thing and another, these cycles of time flowing back and forth, but watch them with no agenda, right? I'm not trying to use it. I'm not trying to manipulate it. I'm not trying to take advantage of it. I can just watch it. Neither looking forward nor behind. So I'm not saying, oh, what are the mistakes we have made that brought us here? Or looking forward to when we're going to get out and counting the days and marking them off. I'm not planning. I'm not shaping. I'm not building. Just being present without judgment or agenda. So as I said, Jennifer and I are walking the same path every day, going down the same route every day. And I've been trying to use that to be still throughout that period. That is to just notice as we go along what changes and what doesn't. And I'm not talking about looking for where the puddles are today because it rained so that I don't step in them or where branches fell. It's just noticing that flowers are coming up. They're changing a little bit. This one gets picked, that one gets moved. It's amazing how many times we can walk that same walk and she will have noticed something that I didn't notice. I mean, to make it significant, somebody we walked by like they tore down their entire garage and I didn't notice for 2 days. So I'm failing to notice this thing I'm walking by because it has no relation to what I'm doing and what I'm trying to achieve. I'm not able to just be there. I missed it. So that, I think, is a challenge that I wanted to present this week, right? Of being still, of appreciating the emptiness, the relationships, and the change that we're dealing with. And stop, at least for a little bit, trying to make it into something or use it for something or adapt it for something. So those are my thoughts for this week. All right, where's the, there we are. All right, so anybody have any